My daughter handed me an envelope over breakfast and said, "I have a surprise for you." Inside was a bill for $530,000 in her husband's name. They told me to sell my house to pay it by Monday. I said no. My reward was a chest full of hot coffee and my daughter's husband screaming at me to get out of my own home. But that wasn't the real surprise. The real surprise came an hour later when two police officers stood on my porch and my daughter pointed a trembling finger at me, accusing me of being a violent, unstable old man. Before I tell you how a 70-year-old retired steelworker turned the tables on them using a secret my late wife left behind, let me know in the comments where you're listening to my story from. And please hit that like button if you believe a person's home is their sanctuary. My name is Theodore Evans, but my friends just call me Theo. The steady tick-tock of the old grandfather clock in the hall was the only sound in the house. I was standing in the kitchen waiting for the last of the coffee to drip into the glass pot. The rich, dark smell, usually a comfort, did nothing to ease the tension coiling in my gut. Today, the air in my own home felt thick, heavy, like the moments before a thunderstorm. 70 years on this earth have carved lines around my eyes and turned my hair to silver. But my hands, the same hands that spent 40 years in the heat and fury of a steel mill, are still steady. I'd just set the coffee pot on the table when the doorbell rang. It was a sharp, impatient sound. I knew who it was without even looking. I opened the door to my daughter Alicia and her husband Brent. Alicia was dressed in an expensive business suit that looked out of place in my humble home. She looked like she was heading to a boardroom meeting, not visiting her father. Brent stood behind her, arms crossed with that permanent smirk of his that always set my teeth on edge. "Hello, Dad," Alicia said. Her voice was as crisp and cold as a winter morning. They walked past me into the house without an invitation, as if they already owned it. Alicia, Brent. I nodded, closing the door behind them. "You're here early." "We don't have much time," Brent said, walking straight to the dining room and taking the seat that used to belong to my wife Gloria. "We need to talk." Alicia said nothing. She just poured herself a glass of water from the kitchen sink and sat across from him, placing her designer handbag on the table. It was an act of claiming territory. I took my usual seat, feeling the weight of the unspoken hanging between us. After a few moments of suffocating silence, Alicia finally spoke, her eyes locked on mine. "I have a surprise for you." She slid a thick, cream-colored envelope across the polished oak table. It had no stamp, no address, just the cold, impersonal feel of official business. My hand hesitated before I picked it up. In my 70 years, I've learned that surprises announced this way are rarely good. I carefully tore open the seal. Inside was a stack of stapled documents. The bold letters at the top of the first page jumped out at me, urgent demand for payment, and then a number that made the air leave my lungs. $530,000. The name listed beneath it, the debtor, was Brent Miller. I looked up, my body frozen but my mind racing. $500,000. That was more money than I had earned in 40 years of back-breaking work of sweat and sometimes blood, surrounded by the roar of machinery and the blistering heat of the furnaces. I had done all that to buy this small piece of peace, this house, to raise my only daughter. And now she sat there watching me with a stranger's eyes while her husband pushed his catastrophic failure across the table toward me. Brent leaned back in his chair, his arrogance on full display. "It was just a business risk, Theo. A real estate deal that went south. It happens." He talked about $500,000 like it was pocket change. "The problem is the lender is a private firm. Their interest rates are brutal. We have to pay the full amount by next Monday or things get very, very ugly." I placed the papers down on the table. My hand didn't shake. The initial shock was already hardening into a cold, clear resolve. I looked directly at Alicia, the daughter I once held in my arms, the little girl I taught to take her first steps on this very floor. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice low and even. "We need your help," she said. But it wasn't a request. It was a demand. "We've talked it over. It's the only way." She gestured around the room at the walls that held our entire family's history. "We need you to sell this house." For a second I thought I'd misheard her. Sell this house. The house Gloria and I saved every penny to buy, the place where we painted the fence together, where we planted the rose bushes in the backyard, the house where Gloria took her last breath in my arms in our bed upstairs. The very idea felt like a sacrilege. I searched Alicia's eyes for a trace of the little girl I knew, but all I found was a cold, hard ambition. It was like greed had hollowed her out from the inside. I took a deep breath and placed my palms flat on the table. No. One word. But it held the weight of 40 years of labor of a love that was gone and of a man's last shred of dignity. The change in Alicia's face was instant. Her calm, businesslike mask shattered, revealing an ugly rage beneath. "No. What do you mean, no?" she snapped, her voice rising. "After everything we're going through, you can't be that selfish. This is about family." "That's right," Brent chimed in, tapping the table for emphasis. "It's a family responsibility. We're not asking for a handout. After we pay the debt, the rest of the money is yours. You can find a nice retirement community. Much more convenient." "A retirement community?" I repeated the words, feeling like ice in my chest. "You want to throw your father out of his home to pay for your gambling debts, and you call that a family responsibility?" "It wasn't gambling," Alicia screamed, shooting to her feet. "It was an investment. It was for our future. Something you would never understand. All you've ever known is that filthy steel mill in this dusty old house." Her words were like knives. A sharp pain pierced my chest, worse than any burn I'd ever gotten from the mill. I stood up to face her, my own anger rising. "This dusty old house is everything I have. It's your mother's legacy. I am not selling it." The finality in my voice seemed to push Alicia over the edge. In a flash of uncontrolled fury, she grabbed my coffee cup, still steaming hot, and threw its contents directly at me. The searing liquid soaked through my shirt, and a wave of intense, burning pain spread across my chest. I staggered back, too stunned by the shock and the betrayal to even cry out. My daughter, my own daughter, had done this. Brent made no move to stop her. He stood up too, pointing a finger at my face. "See what you did? You pushed her to this. Get out. Just get out of here before we stop being nice. This is my house," I roared, the physical pain fueling my rage. "You are the ones who need to get out. Now." They stared at me for a moment, perhaps surprised by my fierce resistance. Then Alicia, with a dramatic theatrical sob, turned and ran for the door. Brent followed right behind her. The door slammed shut, leaving me alone in the shattered silence. I looked down at the dark brown stain spreading across my shirt, feeling the sting on my skin and a much deeper ache in my soul. About an hour later, after I'd changed my shirt and was pressing a bag of frozen peas against the angry red welt on my chest, there was a hard knock on the door. Not the bell this time. It was the firm official knock of the police. I opened it to find two officers, a man and a woman, their expressions serious, and standing behind them on my front walkway were Alicia and Brent. My daughter was in the middle of a full-blown performance, crying into her husband's shoulder as he held her with a look of feigned concern. "Sir, we received a call about a domestic disturbance," the male officer said. "Your daughter and son-in-law reported that you've been acting violently and are mentally unstable. They're concerned for your safety and their own." I looked past the officer's shoulder right into the deceitful eyes of my daughter, and I understood. This wasn't just a request. This was an attack, and it was just getting started. I stood there in the doorway long after the police cruiser disappeared down the street. The silence that rushed back into the house was different now. It wasn't the quiet peace of a Sunday morning. It was heavy, suffocating, filled with the echoes of ugly words and false tears. A sane man might have been shaking with rage or crumbling with despair. A different man might have felt his heart hammering against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of old bones. But I felt a strange and terrible calm settle over me. It was the kind of calm that comes after the fire has burned through, leaving behind only hardened earth and the clear, cold truth. My daughter, my only child, had just tried to destroy me. I closed the front door, the click of the latch sounding unnaturally loud. I walked through the living room, my hand trailing along the back of the worn floral sofa. Gloria and I had picked it out together 30 years ago. We argued for a week about the color. She won, of course. She always did. I ran my fingers over a small scratch on the wooden armrest, a mark left by Alicia's roller skates when she was 7. I'd been angry at the time, but Gloria had just laughed and said, "It's a memory, Theo. A house isn't a home until it has a few scars." This house was full of our scars, our memories. It was a living thing built not just from wood and nails, but from 40 years of laughter, arguments, birthday parties, and quiet nights. I had paid for every single board, every shingle on the roof, with hours of my life spent in the roaring heat of the steel mill. I could still feel the phantom heat on my skin, the clang of metal on metal that vibrated in your bones long after you'd clocked out. I'd come home each day covered in sweat and grime, and Gloria would be here. She'd take one look at my exhausted face, and her smile would wash it all away. This house was our sanctuary from a hard world. I stopped in front of the mantelpiece, my eyes landing on the silver-framed photo of her. It was taken on our 25th anniversary. She was smiling, her eyes crinkling at the corners, full of a light that could make the darkest day bright. I picked up the frame, the cool metal a comfort in my hand. "Oh, Gloria," I whispered to the empty room. "You saw this, didn't you? You always saw people for who they really were." She had been wary of Brent from the very beginning. She never said it outright, not in a way that would cause a fight with Alicia, but I saw it in the way she'd watch him, a quiet, assessing gaze. She saw the greed behind his charming smile, the laziness hiding beneath his expensive suits. I had told her she was being too hard on him, that she needed to give him a chance for Alicia's sake. How wrong I had been, how foolishly, blindly wrong. And Alicia, my little girl. What had happened to her? When did she become this cold, calculating stranger who could look her father in the eye and try to strip him of his home, his dignity? Was it the money? Was it Brent's influence? Or was there a weakness in her that I had simply refused to see? The pain of that question was a sharp physical ache in my chest, worse than the coffee burn. I stared at Gloria's face, at her kind, knowing smile. And in the silence, I found my answer. Panic is a fire that melts weak men into puddles of fear. But I am not a weak man. I am a steel worker. For 40 years I lived and worked in the heart of the furnace. I learned that fire doesn't just destroy, it can also purify. It burns away the impurities, leaving only what is strong and true. The shock of what my daughter had done, the heat of her betrayal, had burned away all my remaining illusions. I saw everything clearly now. This wasn't just about a house, it was about a promise. A promise I made to Gloria to protect the life we built together. Selling this house wouldn't just be giving up a piece of property. It would be digging up her bones and selling them to the highest bidder. It would be telling the world that our 40 years of hard work and love meant nothing. It would be letting them win, and I would not let them win. They thought I was just a tired, broken old man, an easy target. They had forgotten where I came from. They had forgotten what I was made of. I am a man of steel. I know how to handle pressure. I know how to withstand the heat, and I know how to be patient. My mind, once a storm of hurt and confusion, was now perfectly still. The path forward was clear. It wasn't a path of rage. It was a path of cold, hard, calculated action. I gently placed Gloria's photo back on the mantelpiece, my fingers lingering on the frame for a moment. "I've got this, my love," I murmured. "I won't let you down." Then, with a resolve I hadn't felt in years, I turned away from the photo and walked with a steady, determined stride toward the old roll-top desk in the corner of the room. It was time to open the drawers. It was time to make some phone calls. My fingers, stiff from age, traced the worn leather cover of an old address book. It was a relic from another time, filled with names and numbers written in my own hand and in Gloria's elegant script. So many of the names in here were gone now, their voices just echoes in my memory. But the ones who remained were solid. They were oak trees in a world of weeds. I flipped through the brittle pages until I found the one I was looking for. Carter Winston. I dialed the number from memory. He picked up on the second ring. "Yeah," a deep, gravelly voice answered. "When it's Theo." There was a pause on the other end, and in that short silence, I felt a lifetime of friendship. Winston and I had known each other since we were barely 18, with fresh buzz cuts and uniforms that didn't quite fit. We'd seen each other through war, through marriage, through the births of our children and the deaths of our parents. He could read my mood in the space between my words. "Theo," he said, his voice instantly changing, losing its casual gruffness and taking on a sharp edge of concern. "You sound like you did back in '75, right before that monsoon hit Da Nang. What's wrong?" I leaned back in the creaking wooden chair, the sound a familiar comfort. I didn't have to give him the whole sordid story. He already knew the basics. He'd seen Alicia's transformation over the years. He'd seen Brent for the snake he was. They made their move. "When?" I said, my voice low and steady. "The house." Another pause, this one shorter, harder. I heard him exhale a sound of grim understanding. I see. So the vultures are finally circling. They're not circling anymore. They've landed, and they've started to peck. What do you need, he asked. No questions about what happened, no platitudes. Just the simple, direct question of a soldier ready for orders. That was Winston. I need your eyes and ears, old friend, I said. Alicia and Brent think they're clever, but they're arrogant, and arrogant people get sloppy. I need you to be my shadow for a bit. Watch them. Listen. I have a feeling they're not just desperate, they're hiding something. Consider it done, Winston said without a moment's hesitation. Just tell me where to look and what to listen for. I've got your six, Theo. Always have. Thank you, Win, I said, and the words felt inadequate for the lifetime of loyalty they represented. Don't thank me, he grumbled. Just promise me that when this is all over, you'll let me have the first punch. A small, grim smile touched my lips for the first time that day. I'll see what I can do. We hung up, and a fraction of the weight on my shoulders lifted. Knowing Winston was in my corner was like having a mountain at my back. I turned the page in my address book. The next number was written in Gloria's handwriting, Sharma Anika, attorney at law. This call was different. It required a different kind of strength. I dialed, and a professional voice answered. I asked for Ms. Sharma, gave my name, and was put on hold. A minute later, a sharp, intelligent voice came on the line. Mr. Evans, it's Anika Sharma. It's been a while, I hope you're well. I've been better. Ms. Sharma, I said. I see, she said, her tone immediately shifting from polite to focused. I suspect this isn't a social call. No, ma'am, it's not. I took a breath. Do you remember when you helped Gloria and me set up the family trust all those years ago? I remember you telling us it was a shield. For a rainy day. I remember it very well, Mr. Evans. It was your wife's idea. She was a very prudent woman. Yes, she was, I said, my voice thick with emotion for a moment. Well, Ms. Sharma, the rain is here. In fact, I'd say it's a full-blown hurricane. I explained briefly, clinically. The surprise visit, the $500,000 debt, the demand to sell the house. I left out the part about the coffee. That was a personal wound, not a legal one. She listened without interruption, a skill I'd always admired in her. When I finished, she was silent for a moment. I could almost hear the gears turning in her brilliant mind. They cannot force you to sell, Mr. Evans, she said finally, her voice firm, reassuring. The trust is ironclad just as we designed it. But their aggression, the sheer audacity of this demand. It suggests something more than simple desperation. I want to see that debt notice. In fact, I want to see everything. That's why I'm calling. I need to see you, as soon as possible. I heard the rustle of papers on her end. My 9 o'clock tomorrow morning just became available. Can you be at my office? Then I'll be there, I said. Good, she replied. And Mr. Evans, bring every piece of paper you can find. Bank statements, old loan agreements, the trust documents, everything. We're going to find out exactly what kind of storm this is. After I hung up, I sat at the desk for a long time. The fear hadn't vanished completely, but it was no longer in control. It was a dog that had been put back on its leash. In its place was a cold, clear sense of purpose. The pieces were in motion. The board was set. They had made the first move thinking they were playing checkers with a frail old man. They were about to find out I play chess. After the calls were made, a new kind of silence settled in the room. It was the quiet of a workshop, the moment a craftsman lays out his tools and studies the raw materials before making the first cut. My tools were the truths I knew, and the loyalty of the few good people left in my life. The raw material was the mess my daughter and her husband had created. I rolled up the sleeves of my shirt and turned to the old roll-top desk that stood in the corner. It was a heavy, solid piece of oak, a gift from Gloria on our 15th anniversary. Like our marriage, it was built to last. I opened the main compartment, revealing dozens of little cubbies and drawers, each one a time capsule of our life together. Here were old insurance policies, the title to a car I sold a decade ago, bundles of letters tied with faded ribbon. In one small drawer, I found a stack of Alicia's report cards from elementary school, all straight A's, each one signed with a gold star sticker from her teacher. A bitter irony stung my throat. She had been so bright, so full of promise. Where had all that light gone? I pushed the memories aside. This was not the time for grief. This was the time for strategy. My fingers searched for one specific file. I knew it was here somewhere, filed away under E for Evans or F for family or maybe H for home. Gloria had been the organized one. Finally, in a deep drawer in the back, I found it. It was a thick manila folder, unassuming, with 2 words written on the tab in Gloria's neat, careful cursive, Evans Trust. My hands, calloused and scarred from a lifetime of hard labor, trembled slightly as I lifted it out. The crisp legal paper inside felt foreign, alien. As I stared at the formal language on the first page, the memory of the day we created it came flooding back with such clarity it felt like yesterday. We were sitting at the kitchen table, the late afternoon sun streaming through the window 10 years ago. Alicia and Brent had been married for a few years, and on the surface everything seemed fine. I was reading the newspaper, and Gloria was humming softly as she pruned one of her potted orchids. Then she put her little silver shears down and looked at me with that serious expression I knew meant something was weighing on her mind. "Theo, honey," she began, her voice gentle. "Can we talk about something? It's about the house, about the future." I lowered my paper. "Gloria, the house is paid for. It's our home. When we're gone, it'll be for Alicia. What's there to worry about?" She sighed a soft, worried sound. She reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. Her skin was soft, a stark contrast to my own rough hands. "It's not Alicia I worry about. Not really. Our girl has a good heart. But it's a soft heart, Theo. She's easily led." She paused, choosing her words with care. "It's Brent. He has an appetite. For things. For risk. He talks about his big deals, his investments. But I see the way his eyes dart around. He's always looking for the next easy score. And our daughter loves him so much she'd follow him anywhere, even off a cliff." I started to protest, to defend my son-in-law out of some misplaced sense of family loyalty. "Now, Glo, he's just ambitious. There's ambition, and then there's recklessness." She countered, her gaze unwavering. "All I'm saying is, we need to protect this place. We need to protect her. This house is the only real wealth we have. It's the foundation of everything we built. What if one of his deals goes wrong? What if they get into debt?" It was as if she had looked 10 years into the future and seen this very morning. I remember shaking my head, still not fully convinced. "So what are you suggesting?" "We write a will saying she can't sell it. Something stronger," she said, leaning forward. "I was reading about something called an irrevocable trust. It's like putting the house into a strongbox, Theo, a legal strongbox. We transfer ownership to the trust. We still control it. We can live here for the rest of our lives. It's still our home in every way that matters. But legally on paper, we don't own it anymore, which means no one can take it from us. Not creditors, not a lawsuit, not anyone who might persuade Alicia to make a very bad decision someday." She looked at me, her eyes pleading. "It protects the house for her, Theo. It protects it even from herself, if it ever came to that. It's the last promise we can make to her, that no matter what happens in her life, she will always have this foundation to come back to, this legacy." I looked at my wife, at the deep, genuine love and worry in her eyes. She wasn't being malicious. She was being a mother, a protector, looking far down the road, while I was only looking at my feet. She saw the storm clouds gathering on a distant horizon that I hadn't even noticed. How could I say no to that? How could I deny her that peace of mind? "All right, Glo," I said finally, turning my hand over to squeeze hers. "You've convinced me. If it makes you feel better, we'll do it. We'll call the lawyer." The relief that washed over her face was a sight to behold. It was as if I'd lifted a physical weight from her shoulders. Back in the present, I sat at the desk, the legal document resting in my hands. Back then, I thought she was just being overly cautious. I agreed to do it for her, to ease her mind, never truly believing we would need such a drastic shield. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. I ran my thumb over the title page, over the words she had written so long ago. She hadn't just been prudent. She had been a prophet. She had seen the wolf hiding in sheep's clothing and had built a fortress of stone to protect her family long after she was gone. This folder wasn't just a collection of legal papers. It was Gloria's final gift to me. It was her wisdom, her love, forged into a weapon. "You knew, Gloria," I whispered to the quiet room. "You always knew." A single hot tear traced a path down my wrinkled cheek. "You left me one last shield to carry." and I'll be damned if I let you down now. The next morning I put on the only suit I owned, a dark gray wool that felt stiff and foreign on my shoulders. It was the suit I had worn to Gloria's funeral. Putting it on felt like putting on armor. I took the bus downtown, the manila folder containing the Evans Trust tucked securely under my arm like a shield. Anika Sharma's office was on the 20th floor of a gleaming glass and steel tower. Everything about the place was sharp, modern, and expensive, from the minimalist furniture in the waiting room to the abstract art on the walls. It was a world away from my quiet, worn-in life. It was a world of power. When I was shown into her office, she stood up from behind a large glass desk and greeted me with a firm handshake. Anika was a woman who radiated competence. She was younger than my own daughter, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "Mr. Evans, thank you for coming in so promptly," she said, gesturing for me to sit. Her office had a panoramic view of the city, but she wasn't a woman who seemed distracted by views. Her focus was entirely on me. "You said on the phone this was about the trust." I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. I slid the manila folder across the smooth glass surface of her desk. "This is it, the one you helped us with." Then I took out the folded, coffee-stained debt notice and placed it beside the folder. "And this is the hurricane." She picked up the trust documents first. For several long minutes, the only sound in the room was the soft rustle of paper as she turned the pages. She read with an intense, focused energy, her brow slightly furrowed in concentration. I sat there, my hands clasped in my lap, feeling like a man on trial. Finally, she looked up, her expression clear and decisive. "Mr. Evans, your wife was a brilliant woman," she said, her voice filled with a genuine respect that warmed me to my core. "This irrevocable trust is a fortress. Legally, you are the lifetime beneficiary, but you are not the owner. The trust is. You cannot be forced to sell this property to cover a third-party debt. Not by your daughter, not by her husband, not by anyone. On this front, you are completely, unequivocally safe." A wave of relief so powerful it almost made me dizzy washed over me. It was the first good news I'd had in what felt like an eternity. It was the confirmation I needed. Gloria's shield would hold. But Anika wasn't smiling. Her eyes had already moved to the debt notice. She picked it up delicately as if it were a piece of contaminated evidence. She read it once, then read it again, her frown deepening. "This, however," she said, tapping the paper with her pen, "this is very troubling. $530,000. That's an incredibly specific and very large amount for a simple business deal gone wrong. And the lender? Apex Private Capital. This isn't a bank, Mr. Evans. These are high-risk, high-interest lenders. Vultures, to be frank. The kind of people you only go to when you've been rejected by every legitimate financial institution." She leaned forward, her gaze sharp and analytical. "Something about this doesn't feel right. It smells of desperation, but it also smells of deceit. Why this specific amount? Why this specific lender? Brent is a real estate broker. He knows the system. This is not the move of a professional who made a simple mistake. This is the move of a man cornered, a man involved in something much dirtier." Her words landed like stones, confirming the unease that had been gnawing at me. "So what do we do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Anika's expression shifted. The defensive lawyer was gone, replaced by a skilled strategist planning her attack. "We don't just defend, Mr. Evans. We investigate. We find out exactly what this debt is, where the money went, and how they thought they could use your house to secure it. This goes beyond a family dispute. If they used your name or your assets in any way to acquire this loan without your permission, we are moving into the territory of fraud. Serious criminal fraud." The word hung in the air between us. Fraud. It was an ugly word, a word I never thought would be uttered in connection with my own child. Anika continued, her voice low and precise. "I want to hire a forensic accountant, a financial investigator, someone who can dig into Brent's business dealings, into this loan, into everything. But for that to work, we need one thing from them. We need them to be overconfident. We need them to believe their plan is working." She leaned back in her chair, her eyes locking onto mine. "And that, Mr. Evans, is where you come in. This is going to be difficult, but I need you to play a role. I need you to call your daughter. I need you to sound scared. Tell her you're considering it. Tell her you're overwhelmed and you need time to think, but that you're looking into options. Let them think their intimidation tactics worked. Let them think you are a weak, frightened old man on the verge of giving in." She saw the flicker of protest in my eyes. My pride, the same pride that had made me stand tall in the face of their demands, rebelled at the thought of faking weakness. "I know it's a lot to ask. Anika said, her voice softening slightly. But arrogant people make mistakes. They get sloppy when they think they've already won. We need them to get sloppy. We need them to expose the rest of their plan. Your apparent weakness will be our greatest weapon. Can you do that for me? Can you do that for yourself? I looked out the window at the sprawling city below, a concrete jungle of predators and prey. My daughter and her husband saw me as prey. Anika was offering me a chance to become the hunter. It was a bitter pill to swallow, to pretend to be the very thing I despised. But it was the only way. Gloria had given me the shield. Anika was handing me the sword. It was up to me to use them both. I turned back to her, my resolve hardening like steel in a quenching bath. Yes, I said, my voice clear and firm. I can do that. Tell me exactly what I need to say. The days that followed were a strange kind of purgatory. On the outside, I was playing the part of a defeated old man. I did as Anika instructed, making a single difficult phone call to my daughter. My voice betraying a tremor I didn't entirely have to fake told her I was overwhelmed, that I needed to think. I told her I was looking at the value of the house, talking to the bank. It was a lie, of course, but it was a necessary one. Alicia's tone on the other end was a sickening mix of fake sympathy and triumphant impatience. She told me to take my time, but not too much time. Monday was always looming. While I was putting on my performance, the real work was happening in the background in a world of digital files and financial records I knew nothing about. Anika was my only link to this shadow war. Her calls became my lifeline, each one a report from a battlefield I couldn't see. The first call came 2 days after our meeting. "Theo, it's Anika," she said, her voice crisp and all business. "I'm on the line with our investigator, Gavin. I wanted you to hear this directly. Gavin, tell Mr. Evans what you found." A new voice, a man's voice, sharp and quick, came on the speakerphone. "Mr. Evans, I started with the loan itself. The application was made by a limited liability company, an LLC called Miller Holdings." "I've never heard of it," I said. "You wouldn't have," Gavin replied, "because for all intents and purposes it doesn't exist." I pulled the registration. Miller Holdings LLC was formed just 3 months ago. It has no listed assets, no business history, no tax filings, no employees. It's a ghost. A shell company created for the sole purpose of doing one thing, acquiring this loan. Anika's voice cut in. "It's the classic first step for this kind of fraud, Theo. Creating a corporate veil to hide behind. It's already deeply suspicious. But it gets worse." My knuckles were white where I gripped the phone. How Gavin Anika prompted. I dug into the incorporation documents for the LLC. Gavin continued. "The ones filed with the state. Brent Miller is listed as the managing member, of course. But there's another name on the paperwork, not as a partner but as a financial guarantor, a silent partner who provides the financial credibility for the company." I held my breath. I already knew the name he was going to say. The name listed as the guarantor for Miller Holdings LLC, Gavin said, his voice clear and damning, is Theodore Evans. For a moment I couldn't speak. It was one thing to be asked for money. It was another to have my own name, my good name that I had spent 70 years building, stolen and secretly stitched onto their filthy, fraudulent scheme. They did what I finally managed to say, my voice a hoarse whisper. "They used you," Theo, Anika said, her voice grim. "They used your name and your reputation as the foundation for their house of cards. Gavin is sending me the documents now. The next step is to prove that you never signed them." That afternoon, I found myself back in Anika's office staring at a scanned document on her large computer monitor. It was the state filing for the LLC. And there it was at the bottom of the page above my typed name, a signature. It was a clumsy, amateurish attempt to copy my handwriting. It looked like my name, but it had no life, no soul. It was a dead thing on a page. "Is this your signature, Mr. Evans?" Anika asked formally, though she already knew the answer. "No," I said, the word coming out like a piece of iron. "I have never seen this document before in my life." "I thought as much," she said, already typing an email. "We have our first concrete piece of evidence. Forgery. It's a felony. But I'm not satisfied. Gavin is going to keep digging. Now that we know they forged your signature on the company, we need to know how they convinced Apex Private Capital to give a phantom company $500,000. Forging a signature is one thing, but lenders like that, even shady ones, require more proof." The next call came the following day. It was from Anika again, and this time her voice had lost all its professional detachment. She sounded furious. "Theo, Gavin found it. He got a source inside the lending company to leak him the loan application file. It's worse than we imagined. It's so much worse. Tell me, I said, bracing myself. They didn't just use your name as a guarantor, she said, her words clipped and sharp. They submitted a full fraudulent financial portfolio for you. They manufactured a net worth statement. They listed your assets, your savings, your pension, and of course they listed your home, not as an asset you owned, but as a guaranteed immediate inheritance. They made it seem as if you were on your deathbed and that the house was as good as theirs. They even included a forged letter supposedly from your doctor attesting to your failing health. They painted a picture of a wealthy old man about to die, whose assets would soon transfer to his loving daughter and her husband. I sank down into my armchair, the phone feeling impossibly heavy in my hand. The cruelty of it, the sheer breathtaking evil of it stole the air from my lungs. They hadn't just tried to take my house. They had tried to bury me. They had written me off, declared me dead, all for the sake of their greed. Alicia, my daughter. How could she? The little girl who cried when she fell and scraped her knee, who I held in my arms and told everything would be okay. How could she become this monster? But how did they get my financial information? I asked my mind, struggling to catch up. My pension, my savings. I never told them any of that. There was a heavy pause on the other end of the line. When Anika spoke again, her voice was gentle. Theo, who has access to your mail, who helps you with your paperwork sometimes, who knows your social security number because you put her down as your emergency contact. The answer hit me like a physical blow. Alicia. For years, she had insisted on helping me with my mail, sorting through what she called junk and what was important. She said she was just making my life easier. I thought it was an act of love of a daughter caring for her aging father, but it was all a lie. It wasn't care. It was reconnaissance. She was a spy in her own father's house, gathering intelligence, collecting the weapons she would one day use to destroy him. This changes everything, Theo Anika said, her voice pulling me back from the abyss. This isn't just forgery anymore. This is a conspiracy to commit fraud. Submitting false documents to a financial institution to obtain a loan, that's wire fraud. It's a federal offense. They could go to prison for a very long time for this. Prison. The word echoed in the empty room. For a fleeting, terrible moment, I saw a flash of Alicia as a little girl, her face streaked with tears. My heart ached. But then I saw her face in my dining room twisted with rage as she threw hot coffee on me. I saw her standing behind the police officer playing the victim. I saw the cold, calculating stranger she had become. The ache in my heart hardened. It turned from grief into something else. Something solid. Something unyielding. Good, I said, and the voice that spoke was not the voice of a victim. It was the voice of a man made of steel. That's exactly what they deserve. So what's our next move? Our next move is to complete the picture, Anika replied, her own voice now matching my resolve. Gavin is tracing where the money went. $530,000 doesn't just disappear. We find that and we'll have them in an ironclad trap with no way out. Just keep playing your part, Theo. A few more days. Let them think they're about to get everything they ever wanted. The fall will be that much harder. It was the hardest performance of my life. I sat at the kitchen table for a full hour, the phone in front of me feeling as heavy as a block of lead. Every instinct I had screamed against it. Every fiber of my being wanted to fight, to roar, to stand my ground. But Anika's words echoed in my head. Your weakness is our greatest weapon. I took a deep breath, picturing my wife's smiling face, and then I picked up the phone and dialed my daughter's number. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice sharp and impatient. What is it, Dad? I'm in the middle of something. I summoned every ounce of weariness and 70 years of age into my voice. I let a tremor creep into it, a slight quaver of an old man pushed beyond his limits. Alicia, I began, making sure to sound hesitant. It's me. Your father. I know who it is, she snapped. What do you want? I've been thinking, I said, pausing as if the words were difficult to get out, about what you and Brent said, about the house. There was a silence on the other end. I could almost feel her perking up like a predator sensing a wounded animal, and she prompted, her voice losing a fraction of its edge. This is all so much, I continued, letting my voice crack slightly. The things you said, the police coming to my home. I'm not a young man anymore, Alicia. I can't handle this kind of fighting. It's It's not right. I let the silence hang there for a moment, a testament to my supposed defeat. So I said, pushing the final piece of bait into the water, I've been looking at the papers, the deed, the property taxes. I called the bank this morning just to, get an idea of what it's worth, to see what's possible. The shift in her tone was immediate and profound. The sharp impatience was gone, replaced by a thick, syrupy layer of fake sympathy. It was the most disgusting sound I had ever heard. "Oh, Dad," she cooed. "I knew you'd understand. We know this is hard for you, we really do. Brent and I, we just want what's best for the whole family. We want to put all this ugliness behind us." "I just need a little more time," I whispered, playing my final card. "Please, honey, it's a big decision. Just a few more days to get my head around it all." "Of course, Dad," she said, her voice dripping with condescending sweetness. I could practically hear the triumphant smirk she was sharing with Brent, who was no doubt listening in. "You take all the time you need. Just remember what the bank said. Monday is the deadline." The casual final twist of the knife. She just couldn't help herself. I know I said, my voice sounding small and broken. I'll be in touch." I hung up the phone before she could say another word. I sat there, my hand still on the receiver, my whole body trembling with a mixture of disgust and adrenaline. I felt dirty, as if I had rolled in the mud with pigs. But beneath the shame, a cold, hard satisfaction was beginning to grow. She had taken the bait. The trap was set. They thought they were closing in for the kill. They had no idea they were the ones walking into the cage. My performance must have been convincing, because 2 days later the vultures descended. It started with the doorbell ringing on a Tuesday afternoon. I opened it to find a man in a crisp suit holding a clipboard. Standing beside him, practically vibrating with a smug, predatory energy, was my son-in-law, Brent. "Hey, Theo," Brent said, his smile as wide and artificial as a car salesman's. "Just getting a head start on the paperwork. This is Bob from Premier Appraisals. He's just going to take a quick look around, get us a baseline number so we know what we're working with. No big deal." He said it all so casually, as if ordering a pizza. An appraiser in my home, without my permission. I played my part. I let my shoulders slump, my eyes widen with a look of confused alarm. An appraiser. Already Brent. I told Alicia I needed time to think. "And that's great. We want you to think," he said, patting my shoulder in a condescending gesture as he guided the appraiser past me into my own home. "This is just part of the thinking process. Gotta know the facts and figures right. It'll only take an hour." I stood there, a ghost in my own hallway, as this stranger Bob began his invasion. He moved through my house with a cold, detached efficiency. He unspooled a metal measuring tape in the living room, its sharp zip and click echoing in the quiet space where I had brought Alicia home from the hospital, a tiny bundle wrapped in a yellow blanket. He took out a camera and began taking pictures. A flash went off, momentarily bleaching the color from the room, and I felt a hot surge of anger. He was capturing the worn spot on the armchair where Gloria used to sit and read for hours. He was documenting the faint pencil marks on the doorframe where we had tracked Alicia's height year after year. To him, these were just data points. To me, he was cataloging the soul of my life and putting a price tag on it. Brent followed him around like a proud peacock, pointing out features with the enthusiasm of a host on a home renovation show. "Hardwood floors under this carpet, Bob. Original oak. Great bones in this place," he'd say, loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. As they went into the backyard, I heard him pontificate. "The real value is the lot size. It's perfect for a tear-down. You could put a modern 4,000 square foot place here easy. A tear-down." The words hit me with a physical force. He wanted to bulldoze it all. The rose bushes Gloria planted, the oak tree we'd hung a swing from for Alicia, the very ground where we had built our life. He didn't just want to sell my home. He wanted to erase it from existence. After the appraiser left, Brent sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where he'd been given the debt notice. He adopted a serious, thoughtful expression, an expression he probably practiced in the mirror. So he began steepling his fingers. "While we wait for Bob's numbers, Alicia and I have been doing some research." "For you?" "Research?" I asked, playing the part of a confused old man. "On your next chapter," he said smoothly. "We've been looking at some really nice senior living communities, the Golden Vistas campus. It's incredible. It's more like a resort than a retirement home. They have a heated pool, a movie theater, organized activities, day trips. You won't have to worry about a thing. No more cooking, no more cleaning, no more rattling around this big old place all by yourself. He was selling it, packaging up the end of my independent life as if it were a luxury vacation. I don't know, Brent, I mumbled, looking down at my worn hands. This has been my home for 40 years, and it's been a great home, he said, his voice bright and dismissive. But life is about moving forward. This is a chance for a new adventure, for all of us. The threat was unspoken, but crystal clear. My chapter in this house was over. That evening, the next phase of the assault began. The phone calls. Alicia took the lead on these, her voice a weaponized tool of manipulation. The first time she called, she was crying, her voice thick with manufactured sobs. "Daddy," she wept, "I'm so scared." Those men from Apex Capital called again. They were so horrible, Brent had to hang up on them. They said they were going to ruin us. "I can't sleep, I can't eat. Please, Daddy, you have to help us. I don't know what else to do." I listened, my heart a block of ice. I murmured some vague, non-committal words of comfort and hung up, feeling the slime of her fake tears through the phone line. The next day, her tone was different. The desperate daughter was gone, replaced by the impatient accountant. "Dad, did you get the appraisal report?" Bob said. He emailed it to Brent. "The number is pretty good. It's more than enough to cover everything and leave you with a nice little nest egg." "We need to call a realtor, Dad. The clock is ticking. Monday is coming." I told her I was still thinking that it was a lot to process. The frustration in her sigh was audible. The final call came on Friday, the day before the meeting I had scheduled. The mask of the loving daughter, already cracked, fell away completely. I had told her I was still unsure, that I was worried about the capital gains tax. It was a flimsy excuse, but it was all I could think of. She exploded. "Thinking tax. Are you serious right now?" she shrieked, her voice shrill and ugly. "What is there to think about? Do you want to see your only daughter and her husband homeless? Do you want to see us bankrupted and destroyed? Is this dusty old house and a few $1,000s in taxes really more important to you than your own family?" My God, sometimes I can't believe how selfish you are. I stayed silent. I let her tirade wash over me. And in that moment, I knew with a final chilling certainty that the daughter I had raised was gone. A greedy, cruel stranger was wearing her face. And I felt no more guilt about what was coming. I felt nothing but a cold, hard resolve. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Alicia," I said, my voice quiet and empty. "You'll be a lot more sorry on Monday when we lose everything because of you," she screamed and slammed down the phone. I stood in the silence of my living room, the echo of her rage still ringing in my ears. I looked around at the house, at the furniture Gloria and I had chosen, at the pictures on the wall, at the life we had built. They saw it all as a pile of cash, a solution to their problems. They saw me as a stubborn old fool, an obstacle to be removed. They thought they were in control. They thought they were just one weekend away from victory. They had no idea that their Monday deadline was not just a deadline for them. It was a deadline for me, too. And I was going to be ready. My home became a stage, and I, the lead actor in a play I had never auditioned for. My role was that of the broken man, and I threw myself into it with a grim determination. But on the inside, a profound shift had taken place. I was no longer just playing a part. I was forging a weapon out of my own silence. Each of their provocations, each cruel word and manipulative tear was a hammer blow against my resolve. But instead of shattering me, it was tempering me, hardening my grief and pain into something that felt like steel. I became a wall. It began the day after the appraisal. Brent showed up at my door waving a sheaf of papers with a triumphant grin. "Good news, Theo." "The numbers are in," he announced, striding into my living room. "Bob says the property is worth a solid $800,000. Even after paying our friends at Apex and covering fees, you'll walk away with $250,000 easy. More than enough to set you up in style." He thrust the report into my hands. I looked down at the numbers, at the cold, clinical assessment of my life's work. I saw the pictures of my room sterile and lifeless on the glossy paper. I didn't see the value he saw. I saw a desecration. I played my part. I let my hands tremble slightly as I held the papers. I nodded slowly, avoiding his eager gaze. "That's a lot of money," I said, my voice a quiet, breathy murmur. Brent's grin faltered for a second. He was expecting relief, perhaps even gratitude. He wasn't prepared for my listless, hollow response. "It sure is." He pressed his voice a little too loud. "It's our ticket out of this mess, all of us." I just nodded again and handed the report back to him. "I need to process it," I said. I was a wall, giving him nothing to push against, nothing to argue with. He stood there for a moment, his energy deflating in the face of my quiet emptiness. He had come expecting to celebrate a victory, but my lack of reaction had robbed him of it. He left a few minutes later looking more confused than when he had arrived. The next day, it was Alicia's turn. She came bearing gifts, a collection of glossy brochures, their pages filled with smiling, silver-haired seniors playing shuffleboard and laughing over salads. "Look, Daddy," she said, her voice dripping with artificial cheerfulness. She spread them out on the coffee table. "I brought you all the information on Golden Vistas. Look at this pool. It's salt water, and they have a woodworking shop. You've always wanted to get back to that, right?" She was trying to sell me on my own exile. I picked one up. The people in the photos didn't look real. Their smiles were too wide, their clothes too perfect. It looked like a catalog for a life that didn't actually exist. I turned to a picture of one of the apartments. It was a small beige room with a single window looking out onto a perfectly manicured, perfectly soulless lawn. "It's very clean," I said, my voice neutral. Alicia's bright smile tightened at the edges. She was trying so hard to frame this as a wonderful opportunity, a gift she was giving me. My quiet, simple observation had exposed the lie. This wasn't a gift. It was a cage, albeit a very clean one. "It's more than clean, Dad. It's brand new." "State of the art," she insisted. "You'd be so comfortable there. No more worrying about the roof leaking or the lawn needing mowing." "I see," I said, placing the brochure back on the table. I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I just was. A quiet, sad, immovable object. My silence was a mirror, and in it she could see the reflection of her own ugly intentions. She couldn't stand it. She gathered the brochures, her movements suddenly jerky and annoyed. "Just look them over, okay? It's a really great option." She left soon after, the cheerful mask having slipped to reveal the frustrated bully underneath. Their frustration mounted with each passing day. The phone calls became more frequent, a frantic barrage against my wall of silence. Brent would call, his voice tight with anxiety. "Theo, have you made a decision on a realtor? I've got a list of the top guys in the area. We're burning daylight here. Apex is calling me twice a day now. These aren't nice people, Theo." My reply was always the same, soft and evasive. "I'm still looking at those brochures Alicia brought me, Brent. It's a big change." He would hang up with a frustrated sigh. An hour later, Alicia would call. "Daddy, what is wrong with you?" She'd plead, her voice catching in a sob I now knew was completely fake. "We gave you the appraisal. We found you a beautiful new home. Why are you dragging your feet? Brent is falling apart." "Don't you care about us at all?" I'm thinking, Alicia. I'd say, my voice sounding old and tired. "It's just a lot to think about." They didn't understand. They thought power was about shouting, about threatening, about pushing and manipulating. They couldn't comprehend the power of quiet resistance. They kept throwing themselves against my silence, and each time they were the ones who ended up bruised. Their own panic and desperation were being reflected back at them, and it was driving them crazy. They couldn't find a crack in the wall to exploit, no emotional handhold to leverage. Finally, on Friday afternoon, they came together. They let themselves in with the key Alicia still had and found me in the living room, simply sitting in my armchair. They stood before me, a united front of frustration and rage. "That's it, I'm done," Brent exploded, his face red. "What is your problem, old man? We've done everything. We've handed you the solution on a silver platter and you just sit there. Do you want us to end up on the street?" Alicia tried tears one last time, her face crumpling in a display of practiced misery. "I don't understand, Daddy," she whimpered. "I thought you loved me. I thought you would do anything to protect me." I looked up at them. I looked at my daughter's tear-streaked face and my son-in-law's contorted mask of rage. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't even feel the sharp sting of betrayal. All I felt was a profound and weary sadness. A sadness for the daughter I had lost and for the hollow, greedy people they had become. I let the silence stretch, letting them stew in their own toxicity. Then I finally spoke. My voice was not weak or scared. It was quiet, but it was heavy like stone. "I am tired," I said, looking from one to the other. "I am tired of the fighting. You are right. A decision needs to be made." Their expressions shifted, a flicker of hope and victory in their eyes. "Come to the house tomorrow evening," I continued. 7 o'clock. Bring any paperwork you think is necessary. My lawyer will be here as well, just to make sure everything is done correctly. I was not asking. I was commanding. We will settle this, once and for all. I stood up and walked past them toward my bedroom, leaving them standing in the middle of my living room. They were utterly bewildered. My sudden move to action, my mention of a lawyer, my quiet display of control disguised as weary surrender, it was a move they couldn't decipher. They had wanted a reaction for days, and now they had one, but it was not the one they expected. They left a few minutes later, whispering frantically to each other on the porch. The wall had not broken. It had simply opened a gate, inviting them in. They thought it was a gate to their victory. They had no idea it was the gate to their reckoning. While I was busy being a wall, my oldest friend was busy being a ghost. Winston took his mission seriously. For days he was my eyes and ears, a shadow I never saw but always knew was there. He followed Brent's routine from a distance, learning his habits, his haunts. And then on Friday morning, just one day before the final meeting, he called me. His voice was low and crackled with a triumphant energy. "Theo," he said without preamble, "I got it. I got the son of a bitch." "What did you get?" "When?" I asked, my heart starting to beat a little faster. "The final nail for his coffin," Winston said, and I could hear the grim smile in his voice. He told me the story. He'd learned that Brent, full of his own self-importance, liked to take a mid-morning coffee break at a small cafe downtown with a patio. He'd sit there talking loudly on his phone, making sure everyone around him knew he was a big shot making big deals. So Winston went to the cafe. He sat at a corner table, hiding behind a copy of the Wall Street Journal, looking for all the world like just another retired guy reading the news. He ordered a black coffee, opened the voice recorder app on his phone, and placed it on the table next to his saucer. And then he waited. Sure enough, Brent strolled in, ordered some complicated latte, and sat on the patio just 2 tables away. He immediately got on the phone talking to a friend. And he bragged. Oh, how he bragged. "Winston," I said, my hand tightening on the phone. What did he say? Winston chuckled a low, dark sound. "I've already sent the full audio file to your lawyer, but I wrote down a few of the greatest hits for you." I heard him rustle a piece of paper. First he said, and I quote, "Yeah, the old man is finally cracking. Crying on the phone to Alicia the whole 9 yards. It's actually pathetic." I closed my eyes, the disgust a bitter taste in my mouth. Then he said this. Winston continued. "Another day or two and he'll sign whatever we put in front of him. He'll be in his new cage at Golden Vistas and the house will be as good as ours." My cage, that's what he called it. But this, Theo Winston, said, his voice dropping. "This is the one. This is the money shot. His friend must have asked him if he was worried about you getting lawyers involved. And this is what Brent said. I'll never forget it. He laughed and said, 'Lawyers for what? He has no idea the LLC is even in his name. He's so out of it he probably wouldn't remember signing it anyway. It was a stroke of genius, I'm telling you.'" I stood there in the silence of my kitchen, the words hanging in the air. A stroke of genius. He had admitted it all. The forgery, my lack of knowledge, his criminal intent. He had confessed his entire crime into a stranger's cell phone, all because his ego couldn't resist the urge to boast. "Annika has it now," I asked, my voice steady. "She has it," Winston confirmed. "The package is complete, my friend. The trap is built, the bait is taken, and now you've got him on tape bragging about it." "Thank you, Win," I said, and the words felt like a mountain of gratitude packed into a tiny box. "More than I can say." "Don't thank me," he said. "Just make sure you play it for him." I want to imagine the look on his face. I hung up the phone. The investigation was over. All the pieces were on the board. All the evidence was gathered. My performance was finished. Tomorrow night the curtain would rise on the final act, and it wouldn't be a tragedy. It would be a reckoning. It was Friday evening. The sun was setting, casting long, dramatic shadows across my living room floor. Annika had called an hour earlier to confirm she had received the audio file from Winston. "We have everything we need, Theo," she had said, her voice calm and confident. "The trap is set." Now it was my turn to summon the prey. I sat in my armchair, the same one where I had weathered their storm of insults and pressure, and I picked up the phone. My heart was not racing. My hands were not trembling. The man who had feigned weakness and fear was gone. In his place sat a man made of steel, ready to bring the full weight of the truth down upon those who had wronged him. I dialed Alicia's number. She answered with an exasperated sigh. Dad, I told you we're done talking until you make a decision. Is this going to be another sob story? I let her barb hang in the air for a moment, refusing to acknowledge it. When I spoke, my voice was not the quavering whisper she had heard all week. It was calm, measured, and carried a weight she had not heard in years. Alicia, it's me, I said. There will be no more sob stories, and there will be no more need for frantic phone calls or surprise visits. I have made my decision. There was a sudden, sharp silence on the other end of the line. I had changed the rules of the game, and she felt it instantly. I could picture her straightening up, signaling to Brent that something was happening. I want you and Brent to come to the house tomorrow evening, I stated. It was not a request. 7 o'clock sharp. I heard a muffled sound, likely her hand covering the receiver as she whispered to her husband. Then she was back. Okay, we'll be there. So you're finally ready to sign the papers. We are going to settle this, I said, ignoring her question. Once and for all. As you said, this needs to be handled properly. So my lawyer, Ms. Sharma, will be present to ensure all the paperwork is handled correctly and legally. Another stunned silence. This one was longer. A lawyer, she finally stammered, all the condescending confidence gone from her voice. Why do you need a lawyer for this? It's a family matter. Because I want this done right. I said, my voice as cool and hard as polished stone. No mistakes. No misunderstandings. I want everything out in the open. Please be sure to bring any and all documents you have that are relevant to the $530,000 debt. I'm sure Ms. Sharma will want to review them. I had just turned their own demand for transparency back on them like a weapon. They had wanted paperwork signed. Now I was demanding to see theirs in front of an attorney. The hunter had just become the hunted. Okay, she said, completely flustered. 7 o'clock, I repeated with calm finality. Don't be late. I hung up the phone before she could form another sentence. I placed the receiver back in its cradle with a satisfying click. The call was done. The invitation had been sent. For the past week, they had controlled the tempo, filling my life with their manufactured chaos and noise. With one quiet phone call, I had silenced their storm and replaced it with my own cold, orderly calm. The stage was set. The actors had been summoned. Tomorrow night, the truth would finally have its say. Saturday evening arrived with a heavy, expectant stillness. The air in my house was thick with it. At precisely 6:45, Anika Sharma arrived. She was the picture of calm professionalism, dressed in a sharp, dark pantsuit. She didn't carry a bulky briefcase, just a slim leather portfolio. She sat at the dining room table, the same table where my family had been torn apart, and arranged her papers with a quiet, deliberate precision. I sat opposite her, not as a client, but as an ally. The weak, frightened old man was gone for good. Tonight I was simply an observer, waiting to watch a trap, a decade in the planning, finally spring shut. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. I opened it to find them standing on my porch. They were a portrait of smug victory. Brent was wearing a tailored blazer and holding a sleek leather briefcase, looking every bit the successful dealmaker about to close. Alicia stood beside him, her face arranged in a look of patient sympathy, the kind a parent gives a difficult child who has finally agreed to behave. They thought they were coming to a surrender. "Good evening, Dad," Alicia said, her voice smooth as silk. They walked past me and into the dining room. They both stopped for a second when they saw Anika, a flicker of annoyance crossing their faces. "Oh, Dad, you really brought your lawyer," Brent said with a short, dismissive laugh. "A bit dramatic, don't you think? It's a simple real estate transaction." He placed his briefcase on the table with a loud click and sat down, directing all his attention to me, pointedly ignoring Anika. "All right, let's make this quick and painless for everyone." He began, opening his case and pulling out a thick document. "Theo, I've got the listing agreement right here. I've already spoken to a top agent in the city, a guy who can move a property like this in a week, cash offers only. All you need to do is sign on the bottom line and we can put this whole unfortunate business behind us." He slid the pen and paper across the table toward me. He didn't ask. He commanded. His arrogance was a physical presence in the room. I didn't move. I simply looked at Anika. Anika let the silence hang in the air for a few moments, allowing Brent's smug pronouncement to curdle. Then she spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a razor. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Miller." Brent, who had been focused on me, turned to her with a look of irritation, as if a fly were buzzing in his ear. "I'm sorry. Who are you again?" Annika didn't flinch. She slowly reached into her portfolio and slid a single 2-page document across the table. It was a simple, unassuming paper, but it landed with the force of a gravestone. "My name is Annika Sharma," she said calmly. "And according to this document, Mr. Evans is not in a legal capacity the owner of this property. Therefore, he has absolutely no authority to sell it." Brent stared at her. Then he let out a short, barking laugh. It was a sound of pure disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "Of course he owns it. He's lived here for 40 years. What is this nonsense, some kind of senile trick?" Alicia looked confused, her perfectly arranged mask starting to slip. She looked from Annika to me to her husband, searching for an explanation. "It's not a trick, Mr. Miller," Annika said, her voice remaining perfectly even. "It's the law." She tapped the document. "Roughly 10 years ago, Theodore and Gloria Evans placed this house, its deed, and the property it sits on into a legally binding state-registered entity known as the Evans Family Trust. It is an irrevocable trust." Brent snatched the paper from the table. I watched his eyes scan the page, his confident smirk slowly dissolving as he read. The color began to drain from his face, replaced by a blotchy, angry red. "An irrevocable trust." He stammered the words, sounding foreign and clumsy in his mouth. "What the hell does that mean?" Annika leaned forward slightly, her professionalism a stark contrast to Brent's rising panic. "It means, Mr. Miller, that the house is owned by a legal entity, not a person. Mr. Evans is the lifetime beneficiary. That grants him the sole undisputed right to live here peacefully and without interference for the rest of his natural life. But the asset itself, the house, is owned by the trust. As an irrevocable entity, its assets cannot be sold. They cannot be leveraged for a loan. And most importantly, they cannot be seized to pay the personal debts of any of the trust's beneficiaries. Not Mr. Evans, not your wife, and certainly not you." Each sentence was a perfectly aimed blow delivered with the precision of a surgeon. She let the final words sink in. "To put it in terms you might find simpler to understand, this house is locked in a vault. And you don't have the key. This is illegal." Brent exploded, slamming the paper down on the table. "You can't just hide assets to avoid debts. It's fraudulent. We'll contest this. We will sue you and we will break this trust." Annika didn't even blink. "You are welcome to try," she said, her voice turning to ice. "But I assure you this trust was structured by my firm with the utmost legal care and foresight. It is ironclad. Any lawyer you hire will tell you the same after they've charged you a hefty retainer, of course. Your attempt to contest it will be a very public, very costly, and utterly fruitless exercise." The reality of the situation finally crashed down on them. Their perfect plan, their only way out, had vanished. The smug confidence was gone, replaced by the raw, ugly face of pure panic. Brent was speechless, his jaw working, but no sound coming out. Alicia, however, found her voice. Her face, pale and shocked, turned towards me. The financial defeat was one thing, but the personal betrayal was another. The mask of the loving daughter didn't just slip, it was violently torn away. "How could you?" She whispered, her voice trembling with a rage that was far more real than her earlier tears. "How could you do this to us? To me, your only daughter, after everything I've done for you, all the times I've helped you. This was our future you locked away. Our one chance." Her voice rose to a shriek. "Mom. Mom would never have wanted this. She would be so ashamed of you." I looked at my daughter, at the stranger, spitting venom across my dining room table. And for the first time that night, I was ready to speak. She had brought my wife into this. She had brought Gloria into this. And that was a mistake. The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. My daughter, her face twisted with a rage I had never seen before, had just used the memory of her mother as a weapon against me. Before I could even respond, Brent erupted. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. His face was a mottled mask of crimson and white, his arrogance curdled into pure fury. "This is a conspiracy," he yelled, pointing a trembling finger at Annika. "A sham. We'll see you in court. I'll get the best lawyers in this city and we will tear this ridiculous illegal document to shreds. We'll prove undue influence. We'll prove he was coerced, that he wasn't of sound mind when he signed it." Annika didn't flinch. She didn't even raise her voice. She simply looked at him with a calm, almost pitying expression. "Mr. Miller, she said, her voice cutting cleanly through his tirade. Mr. Evans was in perfect physical and mental health when this trust was established 10 years ago, a fact his medical records and numerous witnesses can easily attest to. It was, in fact, his wife's express wish to create this shield to protect their family's legacy. Any judge will see your lawsuit for exactly what it is, a frivolous and predatory attempt by a desperate debtor to seize an asset that does not belong to you. Your case will be dismissed, and under state law, you will likely be ordered to pay for Mr. Evans's legal fees. Brent's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Annika had dismantled his every threat with cold, hard legal fact. While he was sputtering, Alicia turned her venom on me. "I can't believe you!" she hissed, her eyes blazing with a cold fire. "You would hide this from me, from your own family. You sat there all week pretending to be a sad, confused old man. You let me cry on the phone. You let us make plans. You were playing us. The whole time you were just playing us." The irony of her accusation was so thick I could have choked on it. They who had plotted and lied and forged my name were accusing me of deception. "This isn't about Mom," she continued, her voice rising again. "She would have wanted to help her daughter. This is about you, your selfishness, your pride. You would rather sit here and rot in this mausoleum than lift a finger to save your own family from ruin." She was thrashing a trapped animal, biting at anything she could reach. But her words had no effect. Her emotional blackmail, her weapon of choice for so many years, was useless. I was no longer her target. I was just a spectator. And then I watched the change happen. It was a subtle shift. Brent stopped sputtering. He looked from Annika's calm, unmovable face to the trust document on the table, then back again. Alicia's tirade trailed off into a choked sob as she saw that her words were having no impact on me. They looked at each other, and in that shared glance, the anger finally gave way to something else. It was the cold, sickening dawn of realization. I could see it in their eyes, the frantic calculations, the desperate search for another angle, another lie, another way out, and the terrifying discovery that there was none. Their plan hadn't just hit a roadblock, it had driven at full speed into a solid steel wall. The house was gone, the money was gone, but the debt, the $30,000 anchor that was dragging them to the bottom of the ocean, was still there. Monday was still coming. They had lost. Alicia's accusation that her mother would be ashamed of me hung in the ruined air of my dining room. She had used Gloria's memory as a shield for her own greed, a final desperate attack. And it was then that I knew it was time. I looked at my daughter's face, contorted by a rage born from thwarted avarice, and I finally spoke. "You're wrong, Alicia," I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the table with absolute certainty. "You are so wrong." I gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to Annika. It was her cue. Annika, who had been sitting in patient silence, straightened the papers in front of her. She looked at Brent and Alicia, not as a lawyer, but as a judge about to deliver a sentence. "Your plan to force the sale of this house has failed," she began, her voice calm and clinical. "So let's talk about the reason you are in this room. Let's talk about the $30,000 debt." She slid the first folder across the table. This debt, as you know, was acquired by a company, not an individual, a company called Miller Holdings, LLC. She paused. "Our investigator found that this company was formed 3 months ago and has no assets, no income, and no business history. It is a shell created for the sole purpose of acting as a vehicle for your loan." Brent, who was pale and slack-jawed, seemed to find a flicker of his old arrogance. "So what?" "That's just smart business. Is it?" Annika replied, her voice dangerously soft. She slid a second document out of her portfolio. It was the state filing for the LLC. Beside it, she placed a copy of my driver's license. A company like that needs a guarantor to secure a loan of that size, someone with a solid credit history and assets, someone like your father-in-law. This is the document you filed listing Theodore Evans as a financial guarantor. And this, she said, tapping my license, is his legal, verified signature. As you can see, the one on the document you filed is a crude and frankly insulting forgery. The color drained from Brent's face completely. Alicia stared at the papers, her mouth slightly agape, as if seeing the physical proof of their crime for the first time. "But you knew a forged signature on a shell company wasn't enough." Annika continued relentlessly, her voice like the steady chipping of a chisel on stone. She produced another thicker file. "So you provided the lender with a full fabricated financial portfolio for Mr. Evans. You created a net worth statement that was pure fiction. You included a forged letter from his physician attesting to his failing health, painting a picture of a wealthy old man on death's door whose assets were about to be inherited. She let the horror of that sink in. Alicia let out a small, choked gasp. You didn't just steal his name, Annika said, her eyes boring into them. You effectively declared him dead to get your money. Annika then reached into her bag and placed the small digital voice recorder on the center of the table. It was the only object there that wasn't paper, and it seemed to suck all the air out of the room. And in case a jury had any doubt about your criminal intent, Mr. Miller, she said, her voice dropping to an icy whisper, you were kind enough just yesterday to provide us with a full confession. She pressed the play button. Brent's voice, loud, clear, and full of arrogant laughter, filled the silent room. Lawyers. For what? He has no idea the LLC is even in his name. He's so out of it, he probably wouldn't remember signing it anyway. It was a stroke of genius, I'm telling you. Annika pressed stop. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the silence of a tomb. Brent looked as if he had been turned to stone. Alicia was staring at the small black recorder as if it were a venomous snake. Annika began to gather her papers, stacking them into one neat, thick file. This is no longer a family dispute over a house, she said, her voice now holding the finality of a gavel's strike. What I have in this portfolio is evidence of a multi-felony federal case. Forgery, conspiracy to commit fraud, and wire fraud. Each charge carries a sentence of up to 20 years in prison. She stood up. So the $530,000 debt is no longer Mr. Evans's problem. It is yours. And frankly, it is the very least of your problems right now. You have two options. The first is you find a way to deal with Apex Capital on your own and you disappear from my client's life forever. The second is that on Monday morning at 9 a.m., I walk this entire portfolio into the office of the United States Attorney. She looked at them one last time. You have until then to decide. I will see myself out. She gave me a slight nod and walked out of the room, leaving the two of them alone in the wreckage of their lives. They didn't move. They just sat there utterly and completely broken. I looked at them, at my daughter, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty sadness. I slowly stood up from my chair. My legs felt steady for the first time in a week. You said your mother would be ashamed of me, I said, my voice clear and even, filling the silence. You invoked her name to justify your greed. But you were wrong, Alicia. Your mother is the one who saved this house. It was her wisdom, her foresight. She saw the rottenness in your husband's heart and the weakness in yours that allowed it to grow. She built this fortress of law not to keep you out, but to protect our legacy from you. I took a step toward my bedroom. This was never about money. I would have given you my last dime if you had only asked, if you had only shown a shred of decency or respect. But this was about a sickness, a greed so deep that you were willing to forge, to lie, and to bury your own father just to feed it. I paused at the doorway and looked back at her one last time. Her face was a mask of shock and shame. I don't know who you are anymore, I said softly, but the daughter. I raised the daughter Gloria and I loved with all our hearts. She is gone. I see that now, and I am finally making my peace with it. I turned my back on them then and walked into my bedroom. I closed the door, the soft click of the latch, the final word in a story that had finally painfully come to an end. I didn't hear them leave. After closing my bedroom door, I simply sat on the edge of my bed and listened to the silence. Eventually, the low murmur of Annika's voice ceased, followed by the soft click of the front door. And then there was only peace, a deep, profound quiet that felt earned. I slept that night more soundly than I had in years. The next morning I woke with the sun. I bypassed the kitchen and the coffee pot and walked straight out the back door into my garden. The air was cool and clean, smelling of damp earth and the sweet, spicy scent of Gloria's prize-winning roses. This was her sanctuary, and now it was mine. I knelt down, my old knees protesting slightly, and began to gently pull the small, insidious weeds that had sprouted near the base of a large crimson rose bush. My hands, which had trembled with fake weakness just days before, were now steady and sure. As I worked, my mind was quiet. The storm had passed. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel a shred of joy for the ruin my daughter and her husband now faced. Annika had called to inform me they had taken the first option. They would disappear. The debt was their mountain to climb or be crushed by. I felt only a vast, aching sadness for the little girl with bright eyes and a scraped knee who I had once carried through this very garden. That little girl was gone. I had to accept that. In a way, I had lost my daughter just as surely as I had lost my wife, and I would have to grieve for her too. But as I crumbled the rich soil between my fingers, I felt something else growing in the place where the anger and fear had been. It was a feeling of profound peace, a sense of rightness. I had been tested. I had been pushed to the very brink, and I had not broken. I had protected this small patch of earth, this monument of a life built with love and sweat. I had honored the memory of my wife, and in doing so, I had reclaimed myself. I looked around at the quiet yard, at the sturdy oak tree, at the weathered fence I had painted with Gloria one sunny afternoon. This house was more than wood and nails. It was my dignity, and it was not for sale, not for any price. I had learned a hard lesson in my 70th year. I learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is not to give in, but to stand firm. I learned that true family is not a bond of blood, but a bond of respect. And respect, like a garden, is something that must be carefully tended and fiercely defended. I did not seek out this conflict. It came to my door uninvited. But by facing it, by refusing to yield, I had found a deeper peace than I had known in a very long time. The house was quiet. But for the first time in years, it was no longer lonely. It was whole, and so was I. This whole ordeal taught me a lesson 70 years in the making. I learned that true family is not an unbreakable obligation to endure disrespect. It is a bond that must be nurtured with mutual honesty and respect. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to build a wall to protect your own peace. I discovered that true strength isn't found in loud arguments or angry outbursts, but in the quiet, unyielding resolve to stand your ground. Protecting your dignity is not selfish. It is the most fundamental act of self-preservation, a truth I will carry with me for all my remaining days. Have you ever had to stand up to family who saw you as an obstacle instead of a person? Let me know your story in the comments below.